Today, January 5th, 2018, of course, ladies and gentlemen, you are tuned to the best Pan-African channel ever, Label Television. This is your midday news bulletin. Before we unfold this newscast, the headlines are given by Gauthier Channel.
In his New Year address, Nyasimbe has reiterated his call for the opposition to accept dialogue as the government presses for an end to a running political crisis. Tunisians will have to pay about 300 dinars per month and per household to face the price increases, a situation caused by the entry into force of the 2018 Finance Act, which provided for a significant increase in VAT.
We open with politics. As announced in the headlines, President of Togo, Nyasimbe, has reiterated his call for the opposition to accept dialogue during his New Year address of 2018 as the government presses for an end to a running political crisis in the country. Let's get the details. In his New Year's address delivered to the nation on Wednesday evening, the 51-year-old called for opponents to join talks aimed at settling their differences and moving the nation forward. This is not the first time the president has called for dialogue. The coalition refused to honor the government's mediation effort, opting rather to join one led by the government of their western neighbor, Ghana. Also, the 14-member opposition coalition has since August 2017 called for anti-government protests in the capital Lomé and across other cities in the West African country. A number of people have died, others sustained injuries, and mass arrests made by security forces. The coalition is calling for the incumbent to resign from his post as they push for an end to what they call the Nyasimbe's dynasty, referring to a father and son combined presidency of over 5 decades. Eyadema's false father ruled Togo for 38 years till his death in 2005. For a then minister with the backing of the military was sworn in, contrary to existing law, which indicated that the Speaker of Parliament had to assume the presidency till fresh elections were held. 4 resigned under international pressure, but won elections held later that year. He has since won 2 more elections in 2010 and 2015. His current mandate runs till 2020. The government, as part of reforms, has accepted it, but it is not expected to take retroactive effect, meaning 4 could have 2 more attempts at the presidency after 2020. On a different note, Sudan has extended a unilateral ceasefire with rebels until the end of March, state news agency SUNA reported, citing a presidential decree. In October, the U.S. lifted 20-year-old sanctions tied to the progress on counter-terrorism cooperation and on resolving internal conflicts. The details are given by Nike Bandong.
In October, the United States lifted 20-year-old sanction tied to progress on counter-terrorism cooperation and on resolving international conflicts. Fighting between the army and rebels in the Kordofan and Blue Nile's region broke out in 2011 when South Sudan declared independence. The conflict in Darfur began in 2003 when the mainly Arab tribes took up arms against Sudan's Arab-led government. In the late 2015, the president announced a similar ceasefire in 2 states as West Darfur region, the scene of separate rebellion against the state, but the truce was extended by a month at the beginning of the year, but the renewed fight quickly brought it to the end. The new ceasefire announced Saturday will not apply to the Darfur region as there was no real rebellion now in the area, according to the Brigadier Shami. Moreover, in a referendum held in Darfur in April 2015, nearly 98% of voters had to keep the region as 5 separate states. Then on June 18, 2016, the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir declared a comprehensive 4-month ceasefire in the states of Blue Nile and South Kordofan, where fighting between armed rebels and government troops has left scores of casualties. The ceasefire was set to expire at the end of December.
Now, in economy, the first 4 contributors to the new off-grid energy fund managed by Lions Head Global Partners made themselves known this January 4th. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at this. These are the African Development Bank, Calvert Impact Capital, the Global Environment Facility, and the Nordic Development Fund. $30 million from the African Development Bank, $10 million from the COVID Impact Capital Fund, $8.5 million from the Global Environment Facility, and $6 million from the Nordic Capital Fund. Development, which also offers a $500,000 grant for technical and administrative assistance. These are the first 4 contributions to the Facility for Energy Inclusion Off-Grid Energy Access Fund, a $100 million joint financing fund that is expected to close its first round in the first quarter of 2018. The fund will provide loans both in hard currency and local currency for off-grid energy companies. The purpose of the fund, says an AFDB statement released on January 4th, is both to accelerate access to clean energy while about 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa still lack access to electricity, and to attract local investors as co-lenders. The Off-Grid Energy Access Fund will be managed by Lionshead Global Partners from its offices in Nairobi, Kenya, Lagos, Nigeria, and London, UK, with an initial focus on East Africa, Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Nigeria. The 4 early contributors rely on their weight to encourage new investors, including those from the private sector, to join them. Tanzania's central bank has cancelled licenses for 5 banks operating in the country and placed them under receivership. We listen and watch the report given by Georgina Mpiga in the story.
The Bank of Tanzania, in short BOT, said the aforesaid banks are critically undercapitalized. The banks of Covenant Bank of Women, Ifathia Bank Limited, Jombi Community Bank Limited, Meru Community Bank Limited, and Kagera Farmers Cooperative Bank Limited, according to the continuation of their operations in their current position, is detrimental to the interest of depositors and possesses a risk to the stability of the financial system. President John Magufuli ordered the central bank to tighten controls on the movement of hard currency and take swift action against failing banks in a bid to tackle financial crimes and protect the local shilling currency. We have 58 banks in Tanzania. We want the banking regulator to take action against the failing institutions. We'd rather have a few viable banks than many failing ones, the president said.
Now, in the same line, Nigeria has agreed a $550 million deal to buy 2 Chinese communication satellites and hopes to sign the contract before the end of the month. The account is signed Nike Bando.
Speaking to State House correspondents after a closed-door meeting with the president in the presidential villa in Abuja, Mr. Shitu said that the China Exim Bank had agreed to pay the entire $515 million for the procurement of the satellites. Adebayo Shitu said China Exim Bank and the manufacturer China Great Wall have agreed to pay for the new satellites after Nigeria renegotiated an earlier deal that had required it to cover 50% of the cost. Both parties will agree on a percentage share, as Shitu said, adding that Nigeria has nothing to lose because we are not putting anything into it in terms of financial resources. The minister said the funds were not a loan, but the Chinese company will take an equity stake in NICOMSAT, a limited liability company owned the Nigerian government and responsible for managing satellite communication. He also said, owing to financial constraints, the contract was renegotiated with the China Exim Bank and China Great Wall and the manufacturer of the satellites, and they have agreed to pay the entire $550 million to procure the 2 new satellites. It will be recalled that Nigerian Communications Satellite Limited had in 2015 opened talks with China for the financing and construction of 2 new communication satellites at a cost of $701 million. Then the new satellites, to be known as NICOMSAT 2 and NICOMSAT 3, are to serve as backup to countries' existing communication satellite, NICOMSAT First, which was put in the orbit in December 2011.
Tunisians will have to pay about 300 dinars per month and per household to face the price increases, a situation caused by the entry into force of the 2018 Finance Act, which provided for a significant increase in VAT. More reported in the story. With the coming into force of the 2018 Finance Act, an increase in the value-added tax VAT ranging from 2% up to 300% depending on the product has become effective and causes a significant increase in prices. Hydrocarbons are concerned with 50 millions more on the liter of gasoline, but also energy, food, real estate, imported products. In short, no sector is spared. Nothing that has already been announced and denounced by economists and Tunisian civil society during the examination of the law of finance. Nevertheless, the deputy seems to discover its scope since its application and intend to audition as soon as possible the Minister of Finance, Rida Kalgoum, and the Minister of Commerce, Omar Behi. A late reaction that will not change anything to a law passed by 134 elected out of 217. Result, an extremely tense situation that undermines the government and the game of some political parties a few months away from municipal elections to be held in May 2018. The opposition, including the Popular Front, is calling for demonstrations while the Tunisian General Labour Union demands that the prices of staple foods like bread, pasta, milk, vegetable oil and sugar be the state allocates via the so-called compensation system 3.52 billion dinars, thus 1.18 billion euros in subsidies. The government, which expects to fill the coffers of the state thanks to the rise in VAT, had been warned. A general increase in prices could tilt the economy to the informal. Abdelaziz Kouti, neither Tunis' national leader in government action, said that his party, the second largest in the assembly, was not in favor of the measures of the budget law, but could only vote since neither Tunis is part of the national unity government led by Youssef Chahed. Explanations that will be had to convince Tunisians who will have to pay nearly 300 dinars a month and per household to cope with price increases. From Tunisia to Kenya, on a very different note, a Kenyan farmer is seeking compensation for destruction of crops after curious villagers flocked to his farm in central Meru County to view a crashed internet balloon. Georgine Mpiga tells us more.
Hundreds of locals trampled into Joseph Gutari's property in Tarbiro Gemi Central to catch a glimpse of the high-altitude device that is part of Google's Project Loon program. Project Loon is a global network balloon of high altitude which ascends like weather balloons until they reach the stratosphere. Project Loon was first launched in 2012 with the aim of providing internet in remote areas of the world. Loon balloons act as floating mobile phone towers, allowing local telecommunication companies to extend their coverage to remote areas and provide 4G internet. The device was emitting a lot of light and people came in droves from far to see it. Some came in vehicles and motorbikes and entered Mr. Gutari's farm without caution. About 7 acres were trampled upon, and Google experts who collected the device did not care to assess the damage on his farm and those of his neighbors. Mr. Gutari says on Wednesday that he now wants an agricultural expert to assess the damage done to his crops so that his lawyer can file a suit against the US-based tech giant. The device was one of Google's 10 balloons deployed for testing in Nakuru, Nyanyanku, Yeri, and Emasabit in July last year.
From this, we move to culture as Cannes Jury Prize winner Mohamed Saleh Haroun, a screaming man, Greece premiered his latest feature as a special presentation in Toronto, Canada. The title, A Season in France, evokes wistful strolls along the Seine or a trip through wine country, but anyway familiar with the work of Chadian author Mohamed Saleh Haroun should know this is not what's in store. Let's watch.
The story is about a dark yet compassionate look at illegal immigrants struggling in Lower Delphi in Paris. The film is far from a picture postcard journey and something closer to a season in hell, especially for a grieving father whose fate depends on the mercy of the authorities. Yet, as thought as it is, France is also warm and subtly heartbreaking, offering a moving vision of life stuck still in legal and emotional limbo. About the author, Mohamed Saleh Haroun, appointed culture minister of his country earlier this year, he's one of the filmmakers in focus at this year's International Film Festival in Kerala. At 17 years old, student caught amid the civil war that ravaged Chad in 1980s, he had no option but to flee, moving across border to Cameroon and then to Libya and finally ending up in Paris. In the capital city of France, he headed to film school, which had found mention by an African filmmaker in a magazine. His first film, Bye Bye Africa, was a personal journey which touched upon the closing down of the ravages that his country and cinema was facing. And in 2010, film The Screaming Man, that won the jury prize at the Cannes Festival, changed things for the better for the cinema back home. Inspired by his win, the state government decided to renovate the only cinema theater in the country that had closed down during the Civil War, the Normandy Theater in the capital, Jamina. The Screaming Man was the first film to be screened out there. But this year, he made a film a season in France. As the culture minister, his immediate project is to build a film school in the country so there will be more voices to represent his country in word in cinema. This is what extraordinary look like.
Today's focus brings us to talk about the sporting news. In this newscast, Egyptian international Mohamed Salah has been crowned the 2017 African Player of the Year by the Confederation of African Football, in short CAF, at a ceremony in Accra, Ghana. Gote Prochano has the story.
The winner is Mohamed Salah.
That was just the sentence. Not only the ceremony audience, but the whole people across the African continent were waiting for. 3 candidates for a title. This Thursday, the Confederation of African Football organized the traditional CAF Gala ATO Awards. The edition took place in Accra, Ghana, to succeed Riyad Mahrez from Algeria, playing for Leicester. 3 men were competing to win this prestigious trophy. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang from Gabon, playing for Borussia Dortmund, who won the title in 2015. Sadio Mane, Senegal, and playing for Liverpool, and Mohamed Salah from Egypt and playing for the same club. But it was finally Salah who was awarded without much surprise, we must admit, since the Pharaoh was the favorite. It must be said that the former player of Chelsea has achieved a great year, 2017, whether in selection as in his club. With his country, which was finalist in the Africa Cup of Nations, he helped to qualify for the 2018 World Cup in Russia next summer. Mohamed Salah scored 5 goals and issued 2 decisive assists in 10 games in 2017. Indispensable in his current club, the 25-year-old has also been very brilliant. Under the banner of AS Roma, Salah planted 10 goals in 20 games last year. To this, we must add 9 assists. Transferred to Liverpool in the summer of 2017, he continued on his crazy pace. 23 goals and 8 assists in 29 appearances. These are the impressive statistics of the native of Bassioun at the Reds. Recently elected Best African Player of the Year 2017 by the BBC, then Arab Best Player of the Year by the UAPS, Mohamed Salah confirmed his supremacy by being crowned by the CAF yesterday night. Despite the emotions showing out, Salah had a very touching speech in which he dedicated the trophy to all the kids in Egypt and across the continent.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be... I start again. For me, this award is a big award for me, as a feeling, a special moment for me in my career. And I want to dedicate this award for all the kids in Africa and in Egypt.
At the camera for the production of this newscast, we had Bill Bolongo. At the sound, we had Bill Mange. At the final matrix, Pab Diouf was present. And at the production, Mohamed Aj is the one that was driving the comments for the production of this newscast. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for choosing the best Pan-African channel ever to inform you. At 1:30 exactly Central African time, Laetitia Galibika will be there to serve to you the news in French. We thank you. Stay tuned to Label Television, and don't forget, the best is yet to come. Goodbye.